Kamala Harris has caught a lot of ridicule for her seemingly rhythmic kind of speaking, which goes in circles and sometimes feels as if it's being directed towards elementary schoolers as opposed to fully grown Americans who are concerned about their country. And there's been one quote she has said that has been going viral recently, and it's been getting mocked, and rightly so, but I think this quote is actually more significant than people are giving it credit for, and I think this quote that she says actually reflects the ethos of the enemies of the Republic, and also explains why our country is in such dire state that it's in right now. Watch.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been, you know?
What can be unburdened by what has been.
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 What can be unburdened by what has been. Now, of course, I must say, when I first heard that, I chuckled. But then I took a step back from my own personal feelings and I put my philosopher's hat on. I thought to myself, Christian, in that sort of incoherent statement, is there any coherence? Is there any meaning? What is she actually saying? And when I found out what she was actually saying, I was shocked, I was horrified, but I was also edified. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be edified as to what she's trying to say, and you'll be better equipped on how to fight and critique what the vice president is conveying in her statement. Before we get into all that, my friends, hello. I am your host, Christian Watson. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, I must implore you, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment on this video, even if you disagree with me. Disagreement helps us refine the mind, and it is an essential part of a civil society. So I would encourage all of you to please do those things. This content is dynamite. We need to get our message out there in order to help more people and to create a smarter kind of politics in our American moment. Now on to the video. So let's actually go into the statement that she made. Let's break it down. Let's get out of our emotions. Let us not laugh, and let's actually break down what she is saying. So the first part of her statement is what can be. Now, what can be simply means, by my estimation, the potential future our country can have, but this future depends on progress. The word progress is going to be very important in a few seconds, because the word progress kind of underlies what Harris is trying to get at here in her statement. Then she says, unburdened by what has been. So a potential future motivated by progress that is not tied to any limitations. Now, for those of you who understand history and understand how society works, you'll understand that everything needs limitations. If an action does not have limitations that it acts within, that action is unrestrained, and that unrestrained action can cause chaos, it can cause tyranny, it can cause a whole host of social and moral ills that ultimately degrade the society, degrade the individuals in the society, and harm the country. Again, keep this in mind for the future. But also, unburdened by what has been means that you are rejecting tradition, the past, or even the present, in the hope of a future that you wish to create again through progress. The significance of that single statement is that Harris is articulating a 125-plus-year-old ethos that has underlied progressivism in its march through America's institutions. The goal is always to move forward. What did Barack Obama say? We are not going back, we're moving forward.
We have been there. We've tried that, and we're not going back. We are moving forward, America.
You know, this has been the ethos animating progressivism for a very long time. The goal is also to move forward, but they move forward by using rhetoric and coercion and force, i.e. policies, i.e. propaganda, rather than promoting a society where progress is viewed from a bottom-up perspective, where it is organic and where it is encouraged by allowing individuals to voluntarily associate in their communities. They envision a society where central managers or where politicians that are on high bring forth what could be, as Harris would say, by way of law. So yes, this is actually quite funny when you hear it once, But when you look at what she's actually saying, it's a dangerous sentiment that is consistently reenacted by progressives in their policy and their rhetoric, which discards the place of the individual as the moving force of American society, as opposed to the centralized agencies, the bureaucracy, politicians, and power on high. Speaking of power, the progressive ethos around power and around the meaning of words is actually quite dangerous. Because the moment you believe that power can be the tool which creates a better society is the moment you actually destroy the fabric that binds society together. And that fabric very simply is, number one, the virtue of people in society, and number two, the willingness for people in society to enact their virtue through willful volition, through their own actions. You can't force virtue. But the thing is, progressivism has sold America this lie that you can force virtue, and it has created a massive welfare state that replaced the role that communities and social relationships played in taking care of the downtrodden and taking care of the hungry, and displaced them by having the welfare office, the unemployment office, and other entities and that produce things like Social Security keep people hooked on their government. So the one that gives you what you need ultimately controls what you do, and that has been, again, the philosophy of progressivism for so long. Because before that point came along, progressives will tell you, well, America didn't have any social safety net, and therefore it was more dangerous in society. Again, what can be will create this new infrastructure unburdened by what has been, i.e., the traditions of the past. Now, this sentiment's also on display when you consider how progressives in the early 20th century treated the Constitution. In his essay, A Study on Administration, Woodrow Wilson, one of the most famous, and I would say, in my opinion, infamous progressive presidents, he said that the politics of administration, or that the matters of administration are separate from the matters of politics. And what he was saying is that the Constitution and abstract debates over government have very little relevance in how we actually administer, i.e. run the government. Therefore, we have to separate how we run the government from what the goals of the government should be and what the moral legitimacy of the government is. In other words, we can have this unaccountable class and this unaccountable exercise of power that is not concerned with principles or morality or anything like that, but is concerned with instead the divine will of the administrators. In other words, you get rule by fiat, tyranny by fiat, and that is the kind of thing we have today with the administrative state. Remember, what can be, i.e. the past, the Constitution, our history, unburdened by what has been. Well, actually, let's actually switch it over. What has been is the past, the Constitution, traditions. What can be is the new future she wishes to usher forth. So this is actually a rallying call, a war cry against America, if you truly understand what Kamala Harris is saying. One last point before we close. I think Harris's words in this case actually also reflect a long tradition put forth by progressives and leftists in terms of how they treat words. Now, we all understand that progressives and leftists enjoy changing words, and they enjoy weaponizing words against people. That's the basic point that many of you understand, so I will not go over that. But what I will say is that there's also a kind of method in the progressive tradition, if you look at it intellectually, that describes how words should be used in general versus how words should be used in matters of politics. So Woodrow Wilson said in his book, The Leaders of Men, where he's talking about this kind of phenomenon, he makes a distinction between the man who writes and the man who leads, the man who writes and the man who must actually act out ideas. And in summation, Wilson is basically saying that the writer as a category is specific and mindful and so on and so forth, and he is exact with his words, and he understands the complexity of society. But the leader deals in broad strokes, according to Wilson, absolutes and generalizations. Now, an author, T.H. Vale Motter at the Princeton University actually made the observation that Wilson took this principle and he used this principle to inform his presidency, one of the most outwardly progressive presidencies in America, and he oftentimes said things he did not mean, and he meant things he did not say. So this manipulation of language is not just about instrumentalism, wanting to use it for a certain goal, nor is it just about playing games. See, a lot of us will identify the symptoms of a problem, but will never actually diagnose the root cause of the problem, which leaves you in the dust and leaves your enemy 10 steps ahead of you. This is not about just playing games. It is about a fundamental worldview around the purpose of language and the purpose of meaning and the purpose of power in society. This is not shallow. This is actually quite deep, but for that reason, it's also quite dangerous. So in summation, my friends, Harris is not just being rhetorically flourish with her words. She's not simply being incoherent, although she is most certainly. She is expressing a dangerous idea that cuts against the core of everything that we hold dear in America and everything that we hold dear as people who wish to have the kind of society envisioned by the natural law framework that spawned America. Everything that we seek as constitutional conservatives, as pro-America people, as conservatives, to conserve, what she's saying goes against that. The future, my friends, is not best orchestrated from on high. The future cannot be guaranteed by the maneuver of power. The future can only be guaranteed by the consummate actions of those in the present and their willingness to bind their actions towards virtue and to work out that process through voluntary cooperation with their fellow man. The moment power becomes the mover of society is the moment society becomes nothing more than a den of serfdom, and more than that, it becomes nothing more than a simple sandbox for those who are in power to play with, and therefore you don't get real progress, you get forced progress, which ultimately leads society to a worse place than it was before. Hence, what can be unburdened by what has been. Let's actually admire and accept what has been. Let's understand that there are limits to progress, especially progress that is exercised through political power. And let's understand that what can be is best conducted in the limits, i.e. burdened by what has been, so that we do not end up with leaders like Kamala Harris and others who would seek to put those in power over the average everyday citizen to manage their lives according to their own expectations. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can to get this video out there. Let us make this channel successful. I love you guys so much. Study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.